September 15th, during international coastal cleanup.
Right.
We hope people will report more.
That's right. I should have come a few days later. I guess I could have helped.
There is always internet, so
yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay. What about you were talking about high windage?
yes.
On that point, I want to talk about wood and trees, because nobody's talking about that. In Japan, when I read the Japanese reports, because the government has been forced by the government of states in Canada to act a little more forcefully and give a little more attention to this problem. And they come out. The first figures were way back were 20 million ton, probably from the 7th Fleet on the northern Mass. And then that was, I came out on my web. I came out with a figure. I think I put it in there about 3.5 million. And then these guys used a supercomputer in Japan and came up with something like 3 million or something ton, or 2.5.
Last figure that I heard was 1.5.
Oh, 1.5. You're geared down.
For floating.
Yeah, but none of those reports from the Japanese or anybody else includes trees or wood, and it's strange because maybe I don't know if you know or not, but do you know what Chiba is?
Yes.
Chiba, okay. On the Chiba coastline, all the way up to Aomori in the north,
Yes.
that was affected by the tsunami, they planted trees. Now, I'm not too sure, I haven't got to count yet how many...
As a protection from tsunami.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they say it worked. I think
well,
they say it actually worked.
it did in the south because, well, number one, the tsunami that came in on the south in Chiba was weaker. For example, my house, I have a house down there, my friends who were affected were maybe 100 to 200 meters from the beach. The water came up about 2 meters, so it was under the windows, it didn't affect any property. But all the trees were taken down. And the trees all along the coast were taken down because the roots don't go deeply. The trees are weak, they're not very fat, they're maybe 30 meters at the most high. And I figured them to be about 900 kilograms per tree at the average, they actually cut them up in Soma, so I was able to weigh them. That's how I got that figure. All those trees went down, and they didn't cause a lot of damage in Chiba because it's mostly open ground. It's farmland and the rest of it. So, but those trees and all the other trees that were swept out, they either went inland, and they did cause a lot of destruction because when they were swept inland by the tsunami, they went right through the houses. And there's one house that's being left up with a tree right through the house, So they became sort of a spear. And I don't know if they killed people, but they actually did destroy a lot of the houses behind them. But a lot of those trees were swept out. And on my website, I put down zero because I don't really know, 0 to 500,000. And that's a modest figure, I think. But talking about those trees, they're, as they move over the ocean, they collect water. Now, do you know David Baxter? Have you heard that name? He was a fellow in Alaska who found the basketballs and volleyball.
I read him, but
they were returned. Well, I interviewed him in Tokyo about 2 months ago. He came over with his Japanese wife. And I asked them, have you seen any trees on the shores? And they have, and they sent me pictures. And the proof that I use that they came from Japan is twofold. One is all the trees had roots attached. Most trees that are cut by somebody don't. They're clean cut. They have no bark, and no branches, no roots. These all had roots. And the other one is that the Japanese woman identified them as being the pine that came from that area. So that's the only, they wouldn't be stamped with anything. That's the only proof I have. But those trees probably would move very slowly. I just wondered what you thought about that.
We have reports about wood, logs. I think because they say logs, I think they both were cut. We have 2 reports and a few mentionings. There were 2 yacht races from California to Hawaii this summer, and one boat actually hit the log,
Now that was a log with branches or clean log? Nobody knows.
I do not know.
Right.
It can be checked. And we have photograph of another one.
All right.
It was taken by Randall. Randall Reeves, going sailing from Hawaii to Alaska, Kodiak. So we have photograph, and that looks like cut log, but with a lot of overgrowth, like barnacles, I think barnacles and seaweeds. So it's really heavy.
Right. That could have come from Canada or, Oregon or Japan.
Oh, it could be poles, electrical poles.
Oh, yeah.
From Japan, or it could be from harbor. Who knows what is it?
Yeah. Well, if it's poles, it probably would have the steel. The Japanese very rarely use wooden electrical poles. They use cement, and they're hollow, so they probably wouldn't float.
Even in rural areas?
Yeah, there may be wooden poles there, and they would have metal spikes on them.
Okay.
That's probably the only way you'd identify.
There was one, somebody showed us a picture just after the tsunami, a bunch of logs floating.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they were wood or cement.
There must be this kind of wood in water. Originally, our main concern was lumber, and a main argument of people opposing to the threat from tsunami debris was that that lumber is going to sink down very quickly.
Yeah.
And still we do not know. Maybe it's something.
Yeah, I talked to, and I forget who it was. I talked to somebody about 2x4 and other lumber that finished lumber, and they find that it doesn't sink. It takes a lot. It depends if it's Canadian, for example. Canadian lumber that is ready to use as houses, like 2x4 or 2x6, is pressurized and treated against water intake. So that would take a long time, months, if not longer. The other stuff that's untreated, I don't know. But the interesting thing that I found out when I interviewed the fishermen in Soma was that I asked them, how many houses do you think in your area are made of 2x4? And he laughed at me. He said, no fishermen use 2x4. They use tongue and groove.
Okay.
They don't use nails and wood, finished wood. They use tongue and groove, which is where you make a slot and it connects. So out of those, it was 140-something thousand houses totally destroyed. I don't know if the government of Japan is including that because it just says wood. It doesn't say trees or finished wood or, it should really break that down. But, those 150-odd thousand houses, that wood either went in or went out. It's a lot of wood though. But you can tell it is Japanese, I guess, by the fact that it has no nails, it might have a spike, a few spikes in it. Maybe if you get a piece like that, maybe it's, for example, 10 meters long, might have 2 spikes. But it doesn't have dozens of nails like in Western housing. But the trees I think would be the main concern. Yeah. Do you think they could make it all the way over here?
The answer depends on how fast do they sink.
Yeah.
This is something that I do not know.
Right.
But as to currents, then they will be leading those trees towards garbage patch and part of it towards Hawaii.
So they'd probably be the slowest thing to come over.
The slowest probably will be radiation.
Well, that's
radioactive water.
Right. I'll get down to that one here. But before I ask that question, I've got one we've been talking about currents. This is kind of a naive question because I don't know much about currents. But how wide is the current?
It's
for example, the north.
It's broad. So next to Japan, there are a few very narrow and very strong jets. Kuroshu extension and subatic front. But then towards east they broaden and slow down, so that total transport is the same. And this westward flow is very broad and it's bounded by two gyres, subtropical gyre and subpolar gyre. So it's broad. It's
thousands of miles or hundreds of miles?
Hundreds of miles.
Hundreds of miles,
Hundreds
okay.
of miles.
So that debris, as it moves out and gets spread out, it would, not the high windage, but the heavier stuff, the wood, etc., would probably stay within that current?
Within that area, but surface currents, they are not exactly, well, surface currents, they do not lead this heavy debris just towards east. They have some southward component.
Okay.
So whatever is floating deep in water, it will go not to Alaska. It will go south towards garbage patch.
Oh, okay.
Garbage patch.
A lot of things are going to end up there.
Probably, but also there are many things already there.
Okay.
So if that estimate of 1.5 million tons floating from tsunami debris, if it's correct, it's in fact comparable to the amount of debris deposited into North Pacific every year without tsunami. Just as a part of fishing, as a part of coastal construction, hurricanes.
So it's at least doubled or more.
Yes, but this heavy stuff collected in garbage patch, it collects there for tens of years.
Right, but
So
the trees, they wouldn't collect there, would they?
It depends. It depends. It's kind of sensitive balance between how much they stick out of water. That is, so wind would push them out of garbage patch towards Hawaii, but currents would keep them in the garbage patch. That would be kind of competition.
Oh yeah.
So and that competition is a function of how much is above water and how much is in water.
Oh yeah.
Drag force.
And that's their problem, because the longer they're in the ocean, the more water they collect, so the more they sink, right?
Yes.
So they could,
Yes, exactly. And this is very general. It's not just sinking. It's not just biofouling, getting some growth, but it's also breaking apart.
Right.
As a rule, it reduces buoyancy.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. Has anybody ever talked to you about medical items in the ocean?
We have a document from Japanese government listing potentially hazardous materials, and needles is one part of this list.
Well, I'm glad they did that, because I wrote 33 companies in Tokyo, the leading pharmaceutical companies, and nobody answered me. All those villages had small pharmacies, that servicing the local people. Plus, there were a couple of hospitals that were destroyed, and they were all destroyed. So that some of that medical stuff might have ended up. So what I put on my website is it's a kanji, the Japanese writing for, and that kanji is found in all supposedly dangerous medicines, or blood or things like that, tainted blood. But nobody wants to talk about it over there. People are very naive about, and they don't want to answer my questions about that at all. I went to the medical place, they didn't answer.
I see.
They wouldn't give a reply.
I see.
About radiation,
Yes.
this is an interesting topic. In short, it seems that the people in Japan don't know anything about it. They're more worried about those nuclear rods that are still sitting in the pond, in the buildings, just waiting for another earthquake.